Hello and welcome to track 1, which is labeled the Environment, Social and Governance track for better data insights, enabling companies' ESG goals and ultimately benefiting society. As mentioned before, I may not have mentioned, I'm your track producer, Robert Lutton, Vice President, Central Consultants, and I'd like to welcome you to this session. This session is about data for the people. The federal government's transformation in the age of analytics. So before I introduce the speakers, I've got a couple of just keynotes to identify. One, this session is being recorded, and it is being live streamed to, I believe, Rich, we said 62 countries? 62 countries, 24 CDOs and data leaders. So we thank you for joining. So the presentation will be recorded and it will be posted in the Whova platform a couple of hours or tomorrow for available for replay. So if you do miss it, please sign in to do the replay. These recordings will then be available 3 months after. So we just spent the last couple of years in a situation where we had to do things virtually. Those sessions, those years, 2020, 2021, we recorded them, and they're on the CDOIQ YouTube channel. So if you've not been out there, there is a treasure trove of past information from our past speakers because we recorded everything like we're doing today. So we normally post that out 3 months post the symposium. So for our people, our attendees that are online, if you have questions, please put your questions into the Whova Q&A area. I'll be monitoring that, and Matthew and David, if you want, you can take questions from the audience here. We have microphones in the audience here, so if you do have a question, put your hand up. We can pretty much hear you, but the audience virtually can't. So if you can just hold the question, or maybe have the speaker repeat it in the microphone so our audience virtually can hear it, then we'll be in sync with our audience. So you can raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you. And then for the people that are virtual, please go ahead and use the Whova app. As Robert mentioned, you have the Whova app locally, but may not be the right thing to watch your Whova app while you're listening to the keynote speakers. So with that, I'd like to introduce 2 of the best data leaders in the federal government today. So I'll introduce them just on the order of my bio sheet, so please forgive me. There's no order implied here. So the first one, Matthew Graviss, who is the CDO of the US Department of State. So Matthew, in his role, is responsible for making data accessible, interoperable, and actionable across the Department of State. He also serves as the Managing Director of the Office of Management Strategy and Solutions Center for Analytics, which aims to imbue the department with a data-focused culture and corresponding talent. Taking advanced data governance, expanding analytics, and modernizing data technology solutions. So prior to joining the Department of State, Dr. Graviss spent 13 years in leadership positions in the Department of Homeland Security, and his time, and also time in his private sector. Accompanying Matthew is a colleague that is well known to Matthew. Matthew and David have known each other for several years, is David Spirk, who is the former CDO of the US Department of Defense. So David was named Department of Defense Chief Data Officer on June 22nd, 2022. David was responsible during his tenure there for strengthening data management across the DoD and accelerating the transition to a data-centric culture. Additionally, he oversaw the key enablers, including data governance processes, data standards, policies, and the promotion of data acumen across the DoD workforce. David also oversees the implementation of the DoD data strategy, or oversaw it. So previously, David was at the United States Special Operations Command, first generation Chief Data Officer since 2018, a role in which he was responsible for creating a data-driven decision-making culture, while leading the integration of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and automation across the US Special Forces enterprise. So these people know a lot about data. And it's my great pleasure to ask David and Matthew to come up, and your mics will be live. Thank you, gentlemen.
I hope this isn't an indication. You have an iPad. I'm in the State Department. I have paper.
Mine's former. No, so thanks for having us. And Matthew and I've talked a good bit. Obviously, Matthew got us very organized and had an entire kind of agenda built for him. And the questions I'm going to ask him are absolutely loaded because he wrote them himself. But,
scripted. Yep. I have a tie. No tie.
I do not. But you know, I thought we'd just jump in and get started. We'll see if we can pound through this fairly quickly and then have some time to answer questions. I will say, as we get started, it's good to see a lot of friendly faces out there. I see Michael Conlon, former DoD CDO. I see Eileen Vadrine, the Air Force. Yeah, Mark Crisco's somewhere out there. I'm sure you have a lot of colleagues you've seen around too. These are people that are trailblazers, you know, whereas we're sitting here today, there's a lot of people who've been in the trenches, you know, really moving the needle for a while, that we were able to come in and just kind of start to provide that appointed, you know, leadership to bring up and make sure we get the resources in front of us. So with that, you know, Matthew, you have been a chief data officer in 2 agencies. What's been the difference between leading in both in time and space and mission?
Well, let me also say it's pretty cool to be here. Be here in person, to definitely see some familiar faces. You know, you and I have both been in the data game for a while now. I was a CDO at USCIS, as you just said, and at the beginning of that job, it was super interesting going in. I hadn't been a CDO, the agency hadn't had a CDO, and so going to conferences like this, I was able to learn and listen. I remember sitting next to Peter Aiken, who I think is here at a lunch. Yeah, there he is up there, and just peppering him with questions. I'm a systems engineer by background, so I'm not, if somebody else has created an idea, I'm all for it, right? I will grab it and run with it in the most efficient way possible. USCIS has a pretty freaking awesome mission, you know, helping people live the American dream, right? Coming to this country. Some of you may be immigrants. That mission is pretty uniform. And that means the data is more uniform. The information technology infrastructure is more consolidated. And so there were a lot of fights on analytics, logic, and going back and forth and things like that at USCIS, whose numbers were right. And then I got to the State Department. And I'd go from one meeting about human rights data to another meeting about AIDS coordination in Africa to conflict stability to Ukraine to Afghanistan, and IT infrastructure is federated to a much greater extent, and that creates a unique set of challenges that I hadn't seen in the previous job. I think from a similarity standpoint, there was a leadership demand signal in both organizations, and just focusing on the basics. We can get caught up in the latest, buzzwords and the latest fads, but just doing a lot of listening, asking a ton of questions, and you'll hear me say this a number of times, just solving some problems. Start with one problem, solve it, go to the next problem, solve it, Let me ask you, so you've led many organizations over the last 20, 25 years, including at the tactical levels of the Marine Corps, and then leading data for a million person, organization. Can you compare and contrast those experiences and kind of walk us through that thought process?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting to think about the leadership skills that are required when you're a Marine in Afghanistan. Even before that, a Marine in Bosnia, of all places, and then you go all the way to and through SOCOM to getting the call to be the OSD CDO. And when you really look at what's required of a data leader, it's having an idea that you want to do something with more precision and more efficiency so that you can execute your mission in a faster, better manner. It's pretty straightforward. And I think what you have to start doing, whether you're at a tactical unit with just a few people under your charge, or whether you're trying to create data advantage for one of the largest organizations in the world, it's being able to create an idea, generate excitement around that idea for unit leadership at whatever echelon you're at. I don't think that's really different. I think that's kind of a rinse, wash, repeat. Hey, I have an idea, get your bosses excited about the idea, get those people that you're trying to get to help you accomplish that idea, and then, to your point, just keep scaling the wins. Make it operational, make it a campaign of learning every step of the way. Don't create a sense that you're gonna go straight to autonomous vehicles, but rather, how about we can just count stuff and know where it's at for the first time? That'd be a pretty good trick. And so as you start stepping through that and you start to find those wins, the wins start to hockey stick pretty quick as you start piling them up. And I think being able to continuously tell that story about where you are logically and realistically on the journey so that you're not overstating what you have accomplished, but rather giving the wins to the leaders who invested in you and showing them, as you mentioned last night, how you're gonna reinvest those resources saved, I think is a pretty easy way to continue to generate that excitement and continue to generate that sense of, I'm gonna go follow that guy or that gal because they have an idea and it's working.
Yeah, I'll pile on there. What we were talking about last night was the idea that when and Richard talked about budget, right? Securing budget, how do you do that? And then we're talking about technological advancements and changing the culture to accept more technology and things like that. And what's really important is not just ripping the Band-Aid off and saying, we're moving in this direction, which is gonna make your workforce uncomfortable and things, but presenting, if it's a cost savings measure, presenting what you're gonna spend the money on, So in my case, an example would be if we're gonna get rid of desktop phones in the State Department and we save $50 million a year by doing it, what are we doing with that $50 million? We're modernizing 7 embassies. We're doing X, Y, or Z. It's that conversation to present the business case. So it's not just taking something away, you're adding something with it.
Yeah, if I could double down there, I think it's also not being so arrogant that you are talking down to people like everything they did for the last decades was wrong. There's a very easy capability with the technical prowess of a data leader to walk in and to look at people and almost be seen like you're talking down to them. Like the air up here is very refined. All of you troglodytes need to learn to speak like me. If you don't, you're never gonna get it. And so I think meeting the domain experts where they are, having an ability to both speak, to a group like this with the technical acumen required, but then also have the gravitas in the domain. Have an ability to say, I don't just want you to learn to speak like me. I want to learn what you're good at. And I want to find that middle space that we can all grow together, I think is an important one. I'm going to jump a few here. I'm going to go down to talent. So the State Department has a variety of missions. There's a lot of talents required to execute the breadth of, whether it's support to medical units in Africa, or, as we work together on the Afghan NEO trying to get that data right. We're still working on that, by the way, I think. But as you work through that and you start to think the type of skills, experiences you're looking for in both bringing teammates into your organization and encouraging others to bring them into theirs, how do you frame that, and what are those basic skills you're looking for?
It's a phenomenal question. There are a lot of skills that are required to be successful. You're not going to find a single person with every skill that it takes to advance data for a 100,000 person organization. So I tend to start with the basics. Is it too cliche to say somebody who's kind? Like, I'm now the old guy on the team, which I didn't think I would get to that. It just kind of smacked me in the face. I might be the oldest person in the Center for Analytics. And, there's a lot of passion within the team. And we spend a lot of time together. And it's important that we get along. I think that's, when I was 25, I would say it's, if you're difficult but you're smart, I can deal with anybody. Now it's like, I don't really want to spend my time doing that, So
thanks for being on stage with me today.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody who's optimistic, somebody who's curious. Like this is about. I'm interested in skills that are necessary to drive cultural change, right? Not just to take use cases and go execute. We need that too, but I think the hard skills that we're trying to pursue are the ones that have to do with curiosity and trying to show how value can be added in a place where none was perceived to exist. There is magic in bringing diversity in expertise, in backgrounds. Within the Center for Analytics, we have folks who work on data policy and data sharing, and we have folks who have built the department's data strategy. We have comms experts, we have data scientists, and where the magic really happens is bringing those skills together. Because if the comms person is saying, okay, I just heard you give 5 minutes on that algorithm, I don't have a clue what you said, then guess what? That translation that you're talking about to the business side isn't going to hit either. It's not going to land. So it's really important to kind of have that cross-functional environment and create that. When you think about, Dave, the competition for talent these days, now you're on the outside of government, but still contributing in a significant way to government. What are you seeing as the competitive landscape for talent across industry and government?
Yeah, so I think it goes to some of what you just mentioned. I think the competitive landscape is, the government can never afford to pay the salaries of the top data professionals that are being compensated in industry and academia. The pay scale is only so much. We've done some things that have allowed us to buy into different levels, but the reality is it's not comparable. What we do have, though, is a very compelling mission, as you do. A mission that you're giving back. I said last night, again, at SOCOM, they make video games about us, they make movies about us. Like, I can sell coming to work for SOCOM. It's a pretty easy one. Now, the OSD and the Pentagon, that might be a little bit different, but the breadth of missions between both the battle space and the boardroom, as I used to say, you can find something that will get a young data professional, excited about coming to work. I think our challenge isn't necessarily the recruitment, because there are a lot of people who want to take their turn, who do want to give back. Increasingly, in fact, I'm finding. Now that jobs like this are presenting themselves. Not everybody could see themselves as a Marine on the ground charging a hill, But depending on your skill set, you could see yourself helping, the Afghan NEO to make sure the data is organized, that we can process people, get them to a safe haven, and then introduce them to a new life, and the opportunity of that diversification of America that just kind of builds and compounds. And so there's a lot of different stories that you can generate to get people excited. I think, though, the biggest challenge isn't recruitment. I think the biggest challenge is retention, because over the years, once we bring that individual in, we have that young person excited to start hooking and jabbing, then they recognize that they have a desktop phone. Then they recognize that they have a Commodore 64 on their desk, that they don't have access to the compute or the data that they thought they were going to because they watched a movie where the military or the State Department absolutely had all of those things. And so, being able to hold those people means we have to begin to transform our information technology, our CIOs of the world. And that's where I get excited about a group like this, as Richard talked about, being named and being direct reports to senior places in the organization that aren't necessarily the CIO, because you finally have somebody that can begin to hold CIOs accountable, at least in the Department of Defense, for decades of, I'll just say, I don't want to say incompetence, but not providing a data leader what they need to actually unlock the power of what we've begun producing.
No doubt. So in the areas of collaboration, we had, as you mentioned, we're coming up on the year anniversary of the evacuation out of Kabul. You want to talk about that a bit, and then talk about other opportunities for collaboration across the federal space?
Yeah, I think whether it's talking to Keshmendra Paul at the VA, who I know is a friend of both of ours, Ted Kalk, who was at USDA, with the Federal CDO Council, or even those here that are just inside our large organizations, many of which are bigger than some of the Fortune 100 companies. The opportunity and requirement to collaborate is just beginning to show itself from, again, a technological capability. I think what I've seen is previously we had a lot of cultural barriers, but when you came and visited me at the Pentagon and visibly came, say the State Department CDO is coming to visit the DoD CDO for the first time ever. One, we each had CDOs that could make that decision themselves. And two, we followed that up with a visit to you to show that visible partnering at a senior most level to encourage those that, now that we are the old guys in the formation, I was, they understand that we're breaking that cultural barrier, that there are not stovepipes between organizations, that there's not data that's owned by the State Department and owned by the Department of Defense, but rather it's owned by the American people, and there are people in charge of, that. And so when we start to create ideas about how we're going to work together, having those tactical opportunities to demonstrate, you were in the office, I was on a baseball field with my son, it was Saturday, the Afghan NEO's happening, there's a White House meeting occurring, we've got to make sure that his numbers are getting accurate because he's got to publish, and it's all just happening in near real time, right? And so with our workforces able to see that, as messy as it was, it's always going to be messy, by the way, everybody in this room knows that. I think we are showing the opportunity that can come from breaking down those traditional cultural stovepipes and saying, hey, there's an opportunity here. And now that the information technology architecture is allowing us more of an opportunity to create interoperable systems and interoperable data sets and eventually interoperable models, I think the future is bright there.
Yeah, I think, it's why these events are so important. It's why the CDO Council for the federal government is so important. You want to establish those relationships before something like the evacuation happens so that you can make calls. I mean, in the middle of the NEO, we had data sharing requirements across from the State Department to the Defense Department. several different parts of Homeland Security, had somebody already, did CBP had data on, did somebody already land in the United States, right? USCIS had legal permanent resident data and other immigration data. Within state, Consular Affairs had US citizenship data. DOD had the data on who's getting on planes out of the airport, right? And they had other missions going on, and we were pumping data to them. And that's where relationships are so important, because you can throw out the data sharing agreement BS and all that kind of stuff. You're making a call on the spot. Can I send this data to Special Ops, command, because they're going to do X, Y, and Z? Yep, make it happen. We'll figure out the paperwork later. Those are the kind of decisions that happen in those environments, and I'm proud to have played a small part in it. It was a really important demonstration of interagency collaboration.
So what do you think is next? Getting ahead of the next crisis. And I think we've seen some of the edges of some of them, yeah. But from a State Department perspective, with the rest of the interagency, not necessarily just the Department of Defense, where would you say we need to get ahead and start setting conditions?
Yeah, infrastructure, data infrastructure is everything. It is stovepipe, to say the least. People are operating with their own agendas, as they should. And so it's incumbent upon CDOs to really show the value of the connections. Another one is interagency buying power related to procurement. Buying data is becoming more and more common. Data is becoming monetized. People are actually selling data sets, if you want to talk about PRC-backed companies and then financial transactions. You can buy that data. People are collecting it and organizing it for you. So I think that's another area of growth and opportunity to collaborate better. We did actually, with the Air Force, with USAID, State Department, and a couple other agencies, procured a data set together and saved a good amount of money doing it. And it was better for the company too, because they got 6 sales in one, and we were able to bring more agencies in. We were doing business development, bringing other agencies in because we wanted to lower our own costs. So that kind of interagency procurement, I think, can be really valuable and is part of the future as well.
Yeah, category management, right?
Yeah.
Just pretty simple. Again, can we count what we're doing? Can we, I'm not saying buy it once for everybody, but maybe 10 times instead of 372, right? Who would have thought vendors are taking advantage of us not having that ability or collaboration yet? But in terms of that, we'll kind of flash back to where you were, Department of State senior most leadership. How's their data fluency coming along?
So one of the benefits of you having started 5-6 months ago before I did in the DoD CDO job is I could run around the State Department and said, the DoD CDO is meeting with the Deputy Secretary every week, And I literally did that. And it worked. And so I was able to go up and say, hey, Dave Spirk, good guy, he's meeting with the Deputy Secretary of Defense. She's a huge advocate of data. And so, that helped. Started meeting with the Deputy Secretary on a recurring basis, identifying challenges, blockers, opportunities. It's been a really healthy dialogue where at that level, usually you expect 100% polished product that's been vetted by everybody that goes up there, and they're merely just signing it off, or they're choosing A over B or B over A. And we have established this with Deputy Secretary McKeown. We've established this really tight relationship where I can bring him ideas, I can bring him challenges, we can brainstorm together. It's actually, solving problems together has been really impactful. So I think that's a mark of real progress. It also doesn't hurt to, when you're trying to do work across the department, to say, hey, I'm meeting with the Deputy Secretary on Friday. I would love to be able to share that you were successful in delivering A, B, and C. So I think we're in a good spot. There's more work to do. To your point about, counting stuff, we have a range of capabilities that need to be delivered, and some of it is, just counting stuff. If we want to do voting coincidence analysis in international organizations, it starts with the voting data and just counting it and who's voting for what and getting it organized. So every person that comes to the Center for Analytics and says, I need something to do, I need AI on this predictive thing, and we're like, great, send us the data, and they, in some cases it doesn't exist, or in other cases it's in spreadsheets or back office databases, things like that. So data management, not as sexy as analytics, but that's really at the core of that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and similar experience in the DoD, whether that's at the SOCOM echelon or down. It's understanding how to begin talking to our senior most leaders about data, so they don't gloss over. And hey, I'm glad I have Matthew on my team because I'm never going to learn that, right? I think we're seeing a generational change there, where the way that we're communicating with them about data is changing. I still remember, and the things related to data. I still remember a couple months after General Tony Thomas's retirement down at SOCOM, we were having a pint at a pub near my house, and he started asking me questions about cloud compute that I finally put my beard on. I was like, who have you been talking to? Why weren't you asking me these questions when you were the commander? And to his point, he said, I was so busy running the enterprise, I never had the opportunity to follow my curiosity down that YouTube rabbit hole. And now that I did, I realized this is commander's business. Making decisions that are associated with the data architecture is commander's business. Just like deploying an element to a foreign, war zone. And I think across the DoD, we're starting to see that being taken more seriously. We've partnered with MIT to create online classes specific to domains where people can get, data certificates. We're beginning to incentivize, everybody across the force, depending on at what echelon you're at, to go kind of self-help and become more data fluent, because with that, we believe we'll have more demanding customers, and those more demanding customers are going to create that signal that allows us to go get more resources to help our IT professionals build that backbone that we need to kind of accelerate into the future.
So can you talk about risk? A lot of what we're doing, we're pushing the culture forward. We're going to be trying new things as CDOs. Can you talk about, taking risks, maybe examples where some mistakes were made, and how do you kind of move the department or move an organization toward that kind of environment where we're supportive of that?
Yeah, sure. I think you have to pick your battles. Because failure in this space for a data professional, leads to that AI winter, where you have senior leaders saying, yeah, I heard you, I invested this amount of money over this amount of time, and I still don't have, what I expect I was going to have. Again, the overpromise of AI versus just count your stuff. Data informed, data driven, data led, can't skip any of those. Along the way, data informed means a lot of run, block, tackle, data management, right? The not so sexy stuff, right? But the really important stuff where you can get a lot of quick wins with that low hanging fruit. I remember when Lieutenant General Shanahan, who was the director of Project Maven, went over and he took over the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, which has now been subsumed into the new CDAO organization. A great move, by the way. And he said, Dave, I want to do some predictive analytics. Let's do some predictive analytics. You're the SOCOM CDO, let's do predictive analytics. And I said, okay, let's go to the Night Stalkers. It's our 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. And they had an idea that we could predict engine failure, right? There's engine class over, you don't know when it's going to happen. Boy, it ruins a mission, assets aren't available, we can't go out. So we gathered up a bunch of really bad data, and we started partnering with academia to see, can we build a model that will predict engine failure? Now, what I was able to do through the use of resources at the department level was kind of backplane us into just some good data management. And as we did that, and we started, we're gonna engine failure, get everybody excited with AI. And then when we backplaned them into just good old, frankly, data management, what we were able to do was save $50 million annually in parts alone. Because we were finally able to say, engine said it was on, right? Therefore, these parts were used for this many hours versus a pilot writing down flight hours, handing it to Lance Corporal Spirk, who was really excited about inputting that with specificity into the Excel spreadsheet that then we'd forward somewhere and it'd get piled up and you'd never use, right? So just because we started automating some portions so that we could have better data practices that we could run with, right? We saved $50 million, and by the time we finished that year, the regiment commander was begging for more and going and finding resources for us to deliver not the predictive analytics, but rather just the efficiency wins that allowed him to have additional resources to fly more hours to better train his troops. So we did eventually get that predictive analytic built, by the way. But I think it's getting somebody excited about that, but then showing them the wins along the way as you race back forward to that kind of data-driven piece because you've become data-informed. How about yourself?
Yeah, I was at this conference last year virtually and with Mark Johnson, and at the time we were getting ready to launch our data strategy, and I probably previewed it a bit. And one of the things that we're trying differently than I think other agencies is in the implementation space. So we are taking a data campaign approach. We're not launching a data quality working group for the entire department and dragging everybody there only to realize that it's an overwhelming set of problems. And so we're doing 2 6-month campaigns at a time, one focused on a foreign policy challenge, one focused on a management challenge. And so we kicked off in October. It was strategic competition with the PRC. It was diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility within the workforce, both 2 major priorities. And you can imagine when you bring a data working group around one of those 2 topics together, people show up, right? They're interested. And in that environment, now I guess that went through March 31st. And April 1st, we launched 2 new campaigns: multilateralism and, on the foreign policy side, cybersecurity on the management side. And it's generating a real buzz around a mission priority, around a department priority. That helps with creating an environment where risk is tolerated. We have this kind of saying, a 12-8-4 saying, where in the campaigns, we're going to move fast. We're going to try to get 12 things done. We'll get 8 done. That'll be 4 more than people thought we could get done in the time frame. That's the model that we go aggressive on. And it is true. We don't write charters for working groups. We don't we don't design a full governance structure. You're not going to see me establish data stewards throughout the entire department for every single type of data. Like, we are focused on major campaigns and going fast. And all the while, we're building a data catalog. We're establishing data sharing pipelines. We're advancing the infrastructure, but we're doing it in the context of major priorities for the department. And I think that's a critical part of creating an environment where we're willing to take some risk.
Yeah, I would say having our senior-most leaders kind of clearing the path and allowing us to take risk. You mentioned it earlier. Whether it was DepSecDef Nordquist, who was the DepSecDef when I came in, or whether it was Secretary Hicks, DepSecDef Hicks, on the backside, actually an MIT alum, her PhD's from here. They absolutely empowered us to begin drafting some fairly provocative policies without all of the normal staffing across the department that one would require. Now, there were teammates, again, here who were part of that small group that allowed us to bring the Air Force together, to bring the Army together, to bring the Navy together, to get everybody to say, hey, we all agree with this. Okay, let's go. Let's skip the 1-year, process to staff something around OSD and get everybody's signature, and let's just get this in the DepSecDev's hands and let's go now, because that's her prerogative, right? And so we did that. We got the data strategy signed out. We didn't have one. Michael did a lot of great work, doing kind of the 80% there that we were just able to finish it. Once the DepSecDev came in, we signed out data decrees for the department. Kind of hearkening back to Jeff Bezos at Amazon saying, that was the way we did business. That's not the way we're going to do it now. We're moving to an open data standard architecture, kind of snapping the chalk line on no new bad. This is how we're procuring going forward. This is how we're thinking about data access going forward. We're embracing commerciality, not bespoke, built for the Department of Defense, as many vendors had done for us. So I think there's a lot of opportunity ahead, but it's because we have had senior leaders take some risk. The establishment of the CDAO, as an example, is the latest one, where Secretary Hicks kind of went out there and said, I know I have a JAIC, I know I have a CDO, I know I have a DDS, and I've got Advana from the CFO. All of these were born with righteous intent, but now we need to bring them together. This is a campaign of learning, and when they're invested in that campaign of learning, and they assume a lot of that risk, it's pretty empowering for guys like us.
100%. So can you expand on engaging non-technical leaders and getting them to buy into what you're trying to do? Just a little bit more about that, and then we can kind of jump into the tech side of things.
Yeah, again, I think it's meeting them where they're at. It's understanding that across the department, this was always left to the information technologists in the corner, and it wasn't truly put in terms that they could understand why they need to learn what this is. I remember talking to a senior leader in industry when I was writing SOCOM's data strategy. And we were talking about the data archetypes, the different people I would need in my organization to be able to do this. And I was talking through all these technical experts that I was sure I was going to have to go get and find a way to get into the formation. Honestly, he waved his hand at him. He was like, he said, these two that you have on the sheet, the tactical and senior leaders, that's where the money's made, right? And his point was, if you're using data-driven technologies, if you're talking about data-driven transformation, these are the individuals who are going to see, hey, if it can do that, can it do this? And every time they integrate in their live operational concept, in their live formation, their day-to-day jobs, something getting faster, something getting better, they're going to become more demanding, and they're also going to become more aware of the roadblocks, the challenges to, whether it's programmatically or technically, or from a policy perspective, execute that next transformation of their warfighting concept. And so, what's been fun to watch is not sitting in a lab doing something, but again, finding the domain expert that has an idea. Getting those resources, getting that technical expertise to them to allow them to begin unlocking that idea, building upon that win. And then, as they get that win, other people start to go, hey, what did Sue do over there? Hang on, I want some of what Sue's got going, because Sue is doing something better than everybody now. And so you start to just kind of have those individuals drawn to that. And in aggregate, all of them are becoming more data fluent. And I think when I look at what's happened to the 18th Airborne Corps, which I think is one of the most transformational organizations in the entire Department of Defense right now. They're also the organization that's charged with supporting operations in and around Ukraine. When I see the individuals that I was working with at more tactical units at US SOCOM in the soft formation, all coming together in time and space at a conventional Army element, and to watch that hockey stick of people coming back with all of the ideas and experiences now, you're starting to see like broad transformation where we don't just think about transforming concepts, we're starting to talk about transforming doctrine, and it's because of data. How's the State Department corollary there?
Yeah, stories and numbers is kind of a thing I've been saying a lot lately. A lot of times we'll have partners from industry come in and they'll have one or the other, and hey, we have this customer over here, we were able to do this amazing thing. Presenting numbers is half the battle. Same as on the government side. when we're talking about delivering on these campaigns, demonstrating success is not just the number of data assets you have in a data catalog or things like that. It's what's the story? The story is what matters when it comes to non-technical leaders. Give us an example where you've advanced a mission, where you've strengthened a decision, and then give me the numbers alongside it so you can hit both kinds of audiences. I think that's kind of the piece for me.
So if you were thinking about that in the story, and I remember, when I was going into the job at OSD, somebody who had been a part of other transformational moments in the enterprise, the soft enterprise, said, Dave, you have to have a story, and you need to be able to tell that story of a data-driven success 1,000 times over with the same enthusiasm that you told it the first time. I think that was a key point, because you do have to just continue to exude that passion for what you're trying to muscle the new organization and transformation in.
I did go to a Black Crowes concert a couple of weeks ago, and they sang all songs from their original albums and stuff with the same enthusiasm.
Right.
So
Right.
it's the same.
I didn't know that, but I'm putting that Black Crowes check. Hey, what scares you the most, though, in terms of, and I know I'm going off script there, but in terms of where we're telling stories, where we're giving people opportunities to see the success, when you start to think about where you are in the journey, I know there's one thing that I don't want to say terrifies, but I worry about pretty regularly. What is yours in the State Department?
Leadership turnover.
Okay. It's fair.
In my last job, when I was at USCIS, I was the first CDO. We had 4 or 5, go look it up. We had 4 or 5 directors that were running USCIS in a matter of 2.5 years. And each time somebody comes in and you give them the one-on-one briefing, like, who's this dude? Like, what the heck is a chief data officer? And you're constantly banging that story and explaining the value of data to a new leader. And it's been nice to have the same leadership for the last 1.5 years since I've been here, to where we've established real relationships. So that scares me a little bit. In a similar vein, what also scares me is that the Foreign Service, which is the bulk of the employees within the State Department, rotates every 2 to 3 years, a lot like the military does. And so the knowledge transfer around where we're heading from a data perspective, as people rotate in and out of different positions overseas, domestically, regional bureaus versus functional bureaus, that worries me a little bit too. And so one of the things that we're pushing forward on is establishing bureau chief data officers. And the idea is to start with a GS-15 civil servant in every bureau, 30+ bureaus, in every bureau, and connect them as close to policy making as possible, and provide that continuity and be the data person in non-data meetings. Culturally, that was explained to me early on. It was like, that's when you know you have them, is when they start inviting you to non-tech, non-data kind of meetings, right? When they're like, yeah, just come along, you seem to add value. The Undersecretary of Management said, hey, bring the data guys, like they're smart, right? Brilliant. Hey, I'll take that anyway, even if it's like, hey, IT, I need you to build out this new online presence, blah, blah, blah. Hey, Center for Analytics, hey, Matthew, just make sure it goes well, Like that's a good sign. So having bureau chief data officers in each environment is really important. How do we get data scientists, data analysts out into where policy is being made? We have a person on detail. She's 25, and she's detailed at the International Organizations Bureau. They're getting ready for the UN General Assembly here in a couple of months, and she is embedded. And she's only been there 2 weeks. Next thing you know, she's writing cables about voting coincidence and giving presentations and just crushing it. And so The more we can do that, the more we can get data talent out to where policy's being made. That's the flip side of what scares me, is like we have the top cover, we have the momentum right now. Let's just keep pressing and keep spreading data experts throughout the building.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. SOCOM's just now bringing on its third chief data officer. So 2 years, and now we're getting a new one. And people said my greatest trick was, maintaining, being a direct report to the commander, in between number 1 and number 2, and in between commander changes. And I think beyond that, it is setting that sustainable organization that isn't, well, Dave was a good guy, Dave was smart, remember when we did that data thing, but rather it's a part of the DNA. We have what we call a .mlpf change recommendation in. So you can't just make us go away. We have our documents that say this is foundational. It has a budget, to Richard's point again, and it has voting rights at whatever those voting forums are. The one thing that I mentioned to you that I still do worry about is getting out over our skis on predictive and prescriptive analytics, because now that we have individuals like Lieutenant General Donahue at the 18th Airborne Corps, the Deputy Secretary of Defense herself, trusting some of these models that we're beginning to put in front of them. Are we doing the requisite amount of work and investing to ensure that we understand those models are remaining performant, not just when they were born, but rather throughout the duration of their life cycle? When I start thinking about it, I don't think about it necessarily just in a normal cloud-based operating environment, but when I'm sending something out to a disconnected, disadvantaged edge, when I have something that is off the reservation and we have people that are counting on it instead of counting on Staff Sergeant Spirk, have I invested enough to understand whether that model is performing the same as I expect it to in the Pentagon as it is eventually, and you name the climb in place, with a pacing threat competitor who is trying to fool it. I think this is a new take on cyber. I think it's up to the data professionals in this room to begin explaining that to people, because we're rushing headfirst into predictive and prescriptive analytics. The data's good, you can trust it. But are we measuring it enough? And are we making sure that not just when we're procuring or building, but throughout its life cycle, watching for slippage? In the DoD with such high consequence, predictive and prescriptive analytics, as I'm sure it is in the State Department. What are your thoughts around that and the difference between cyber? I know I'm putting you on the spot. We're way off script. We're way out.
Cyber is something that we are spending a lot of time on. Our current situation is a byproduct of federated IT infrastructure development. So imagine the situation where you're trying to collect log data across 40 different cloud environments, and it's being stored locally in every environment, and yet your cyber monitoring organization is central. How do you do that? How do you avoid the transfer costs of the full complement of data? How do you not store it in multiple locations? That's a problem that we are trying to tackle head on through the cyber data campaign that we're focused on right now. We're bringing the cyber monitoring experts alongside our IT professionals, not just in the main IT organization, but in all these different federated environments. And again, it's bringing, like I said at the top, bringing a cross-functional team together. That's the beauty of the data campaign. Bringing a cross-functional team together because there's data policy issues, there's data access and sharing issues, there's quality issues, analytics opportunities, and bringing all those skills to bear to kind of tackle something as significant an issue as cybersecurity is. So I think, I don't know where we are time-wise, Robert, but maybe we can do some questions.
You've got 10 minutes. So I'd like to ask the audience, if you do have a question, please put your hand up and we will get a mic to you. Also, for our audience virtually, Please do use the Whova app. I'm watching some questions there, and it's really interesting because in the Whova app, they can actually like a question. So we've got some questions that have got a lot of likes, so perhaps you can alternate between a question here and a question from Whova. So normally there's a runner here, so I don't see it there, but I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic out, so hold a minute.
Okay, thanks. So thanks for the nice conversation. Let me get back to the title of the talk, which is, or the keynote, Data for the People. So you've talked about data for the government, for the people, I guess. Do you have any experience in actually publishing data for the people? Maybe some positive experiences that something good has come out of it? Or what is your opinion about actual public data from government?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. I'll say I think it's about balance. We do publish data per both federal law and our National Defense Authorization Acts. There are certain data types that we are required to publish. I think there's probably additional space to be had in there. The challenge is when the data that we have, I'll say on our service members as an example, that could benefit the medical community. As we start to look at PII and PHI and understanding our pacing threat's ability to, whether it's a mosaic effect or whatever, kind of back their way, leveraging big data analytics into reestablishing who that person could be, it starts to make the challenge of sharing some of those really what could be rich data sets with the public community. So we're talking about it, we're working our way through it, but we are publishing some data sets. I'd say there's more, but we've just got to be very measured in how we do it because of the potential risk of giving away that type of data.
I just say we're early in the journey on that front. We have a lot to do within the department to get organized, so we are publishing things to data.gov, but I'm trying to publish things across the department, and try to solve some business problems along the way. That's kind of the focus right now.
So while we get the question to the next mic, I do have a online question if you're willing to entertain that, because our vast audience online has been watching attentively. The first question got the most highest votes. How do you balance democratizing data while ensuring the data is being used as intended?
Ooh. You know what? I stood up the RPA program in my last job. It was probably part of our analytics portfolio. You could argue whether it's like true analytics or it's automation. The CIO was really focused on citizen development. We're going to establish the enterprise license, and everybody can develop bots. It's going to be great. And that scared, I'm a systems engineer, that scared the crap out of me, because it's, you got to be requirements-based, and you're going to start chewing your budget down dramatically if you have bots running all hours of the day doing stuff that's leading to nobody looking at it. And so that is absolutely a balance. There's also absolutely a trust gap that has to be closed between the folks who manage a data set and folks who want to analyze it who aren't the same people, right? And the ability for those folks to have confidence that people are going to use their data the right way. Part of that is, as a developer, it's really important to articulate what its limitations and restrictions of use are, how you're going to, how it needs to be protected, interpretations that go along with it. So when we publish, let's say we publish a dashboard out there for the entire enterprise to use, you can click all the way down to the code snippets that went to produce the calculation for X, Y, or Z, and really dive into the details so it's really transparent on what we're doing. And there's also business definitions that go along with that. So I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I was looking for my GIF, I was going to be what he said. But the reality is, I'll take it up one level, which was, when we started to talk about the Department of Defense, and they were saying, oh, data's all siloed, nobody's sharing, Eileen Vadrine doesn't want to share with Michael Connellan, doesn't want to share with Mark Crisco, everybody's. What we really found, and I said this in a meeting with our DepSecDef and our senior most leaders from the department, I said, I think we've moved past that. I don't think this is a cultural issue anymore. I think this is both a technical issue, as far as data democratization. Can I share that data? But I also think it's a data quality issue, and that goes to your point. Hey, I know you want to use the data to do that automated decision making, but it's really bad. And there was a lot of people who just didn't want to show their data because the question would be, how have you been making decisions before? Right? And so it wasn't a they didn't want to, it was a, I'm embarrassed, I don't have the resources to build APIs on top of this 1980, software, or just downright, I need to sunset this thing and I'm about to go a different direction. So I think there's a variety of reasons that data democratization doesn't occur. I think you just need to tackle each one individually to really get through it, because there's nothing that can't be solved without time and resources.
Thank you. We'll take another question from the audience.
Hi, Alex Vayner with KPMG. Thank you for your inputs. So this is a question about maybe an elephant in the room. David, you mentioned that one of the biggest issues is retention. And the article in HBR from Tom Davenport and Randy Bean maybe a few months ago said that the challenge for CDOs is actually the average tenure is about 2 years. So the challenge is at the top, and we're all charged with disruption, right? We're making omelets, breaking some eggs, and sometimes we disrupt ourselves out of a job. So talk about, please, David, you mentioned it as a trick that you've lasted through several changes at the top. So can you share a few tricks of the trade? How do you make it happen? How do you balance that? And obviously, Matthew as well from you. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it comes down to just, there's not really a technical component to this. I think it's just good leadership. Build your replacement, make sure they're better than you, and then work your way out of a job so they have the opportunity to come lead the charge, as you sunset. I think there's just some basic leadership tenets of, building the organization, making sure just because you can do something, doesn't mean you should. The question is, can you sustain it? So none of it is a flash in the pan. It goes back to that run, block, tackle. Get things organized from a policy perspective, from a resources perspective. So this isn't personality or senior leader dependent. Rather, it's a part of the DNA of the organization. And then as you work that and you're getting the wins, you literally are identifying your replacement and setting organizational constructs to be even better for the next person than they were for you. I think that's when you move from first generation to second generation to third generation CDO. And I'll tell you how it goes at SOCOM as we start the third generation CDO and continue kind of measuring how that almost 2-year campaign of learning goes. I was 2 at SOCOM, 2 at OSD. SOCOM's entering its third, 2. So I think it's just making sure you have a strong organization. And again, much like we did with the CDAO, the time was right for me to depart so they could go to the next level with the kind of foundation we built. Matthew?
Yeah, succession plan is really important. I had, when I left on a Friday, USCIS, and they appointed my deputy as a senior executive on Monday. And that was kind of baked in for a long time. I didn't know I was going to leave or when I was going to leave, that kind of thing, but definitely investing in the next round of leaders. It's also about communication. You got to communicate the value of the organization constantly. You do that through, there's also bureaucratic ninja stuff to do. I could talk to anybody about creating organization, scaling, personnel. Getting more government positions tends to cement an organization more completely. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. Budget is a key. It's harder to move bigger sums of money. So the more you can grow within your CDO organization, the more likely you're going to stick around.
David and Matthew, we're heading out to break. Just don't run the video yet, guys, just our closeout video. Will you be around here for the next 15, 20 minutes if our audience wants to have some additional chats with you?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to thank our panelist members, David and Matthew. And just as we head to the break, first of all, this symposium is not possible without the support of our partners. So if you do go out, have a chat with them, I promise you they don't bite. If one does, let me know and we'll sort it out. But do have a chat with them. They're here as part of our community as well. And also, the next session will begin at 10:30. They're all concurrent sessions. So thank you, and close out the video. Thanks, guys.